That was the night I learned Ryan Carter had been paying attention to me for almost 2 years, and somehow I had never noticed. At 11:47 p.m., the 34th floor of our downtown Chicago office looked nothing like the place where I spent most of my life. During the day, it was all ringing phones, hurried footsteps, glowing conference rooms, and people pretending they weren't checking the clock every 10 minutes. At night, it felt almost unreal. Half the lights had automatically shut off, leaving long stretches of empty desks beneath a soft blue glow from computer monitors, while rain streaked the floor-to-ceiling windows and blurred the city into watercolor. I was Evan Miller, 26, an Omega designer who had planned to be home 3 hours earlier, preferably wearing sweatpants and eating leftover pizza. Instead, I was staring at a presentation that could cost our agency one of its biggest accounts if we didn't fix it before morning. And sitting 12 feet away from me was Ryan Carter. Ryan was 30, an alpha, a senior project manager, and possibly the most controlled human being I had ever met. In nearly 2 years of working together, I had learned 3 things about him. He was never late. He never seemed to make mistakes. And he never looked at me longer than necessary. That night, all 3 things changed. Slide 12 is still pulling the old numbers, Ryan said without looking away from his laptop. His voice was calm, which somehow made my frustration worse. I know. You said that 10 minutes ago. I turned toward him, and reminding me every 10 minutes is definitely helping. For the first time all evening, Ryan looked directly at me. I expected irritation. Instead, one corner of his mouth moved. Almost a smile. You're tired. Excellent observation, Carter. You're also hungry. Less impressive observation. Without another word, he reached beside his briefcase, picked up a paper cup, and slid it across the conference table toward me. I stared at it. What's this? Coffee. I can see that. Oat milk. 2 pumps of vanilla. No whipped cream. My hand stopped halfway toward the cup. That was exactly how I ordered it. How did you? No. Ryan's fingers paused over his keyboard. For one brief second, something uncertain crossed his face, an expression I had never seen on him before. Then he looked back at the screen. You order the same thing every morning. I wrapped both hands around the warm cup, suddenly far more awake than caffeine could explain. Ryan worked 3 departments away from the lobby cafe. We had never gotten coffee together. As far as I knew, he had never even been standing beside me when I ordered. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the Chicago skyline, low and distant, and the rain struck harder against the glass. I looked across the table at Ryan again. His tie was loosened now, his dark hair slightly out of place, and for once he didn't look like the perfectly composed alpha everyone in the office thought they knew. He looked tired, human, maybe even nervous. Then my computer chimed with another error message, and Ryan quietly pulled his chair closer to mine. Show me what's broken, he said. I turned the laptop toward him, trying to ignore how strange the room suddenly felt. 2 years of working beside Ryan Carter, and I had assumed he'd barely noticed me. But as midnight approached and the storm swallowed the city outside, one question refused to leave my mind. If Ryan knew exactly how I took my coffee, what else had he noticed? Ryan rolled his chair beside mine, close enough to read the tiny numbers scattered across my screen, but he kept a careful distance that somehow made me notice him more. During office hours, Ryan was always perfectly assembled. Charcoal jacket, crisp shirt, polished shoes, expression calm enough to survive any client disaster. At 12:15 in the morning, that version of him was beginning to disappear. His jacket hung over the back of a chair, his sleeves were rolled to his elbows, and his tie had finally been abandoned beside his laptop. There, he said, pointing toward a column in the budget sheet. The updated media costs are linked to the archived file. I followed his finger and groaned. You are right. I will try not to celebrate. I looked at him. Ryan smiled. Not the polite expression he used in meetings. A real smile. Warm, slightly crooked, and completely unexpected. You make jokes? I asked. Occasionally. I have worked with you for almost 2 years. Maybe you never gave me a chance. The answer was quiet enough that I was not sure whether he intended me to hear it. Before I could ask, Ryan stood and walked toward the break room. He returned with 2 takeout containers from the refrigerator and placed one in front of me. You brought dinner too? I ordered it before everyone left. I opened the container. Turkey sandwich, kettle chips, no pickles. I stared at him again. Do not tell me. I order the same lunch every day. Ryan glanced away. Not every day. That answer did something strange to my heartbeat. I had spent months assuming Ryan barely knew I existed outside project meetings. Yet apparently he knew my coffee order and the fact that I hated pickles. I took a bite mostly because I needed something to do. "So what do you eat?" I asked. Ryan opened his own container. Plain noodles and grilled chicken. I laughed before I could stop myself. That might be the saddest midnight dinner in Chicago. It has protein. That does not make it less depressing. I did not realize I was being judged. I am a designer. Judging things is technically part of my job. Ryan laughed softly, and the sound surprised me even more than his smile. For the next 40 minutes, we worked differently. The silence no longer felt stiff. We traded comments across the table. Ryan caught missing numbers. I repaired layouts. When I complained that the conference room felt like a refrigerator, he disappeared without explanation and returned after adjusting the thermostat. I noticed that too. Then, shortly after 1 in the morning, my stylus rolled from beside my laptop and landed near Ryan's hand. He picked it up, but instead of returning it immediately, his attention settled on the open notebook beside me. I had forgotten about the little sketches covering the margin, buildings, faces, tiny scenes drawn during meetings. "You made these?" he asked. I instinctively closed the notebook. "They are nothing." Ryan's expression changed. The teasing disappeared, replaced by something gentler. "They do not look like nothing." I searched his face for sarcasm and found none. "I used to draw more," I admitted. "Before this job." "Why did you stop?" It was such a simple question, but nobody at work had ever asked me anything like it. Outside, rain streamed down the windows, turning Chicago into a distant blur of silver and gold. I looked at Ryan, suddenly aware that sometime after midnight we had stopped sounding like coworkers. "I do not know," I said. Ryan held my gaze for a moment. "Maybe you should start again." Then the lights above us flickered once, twice, and went dark. For half a second, neither of us moved. The monitors went black, the overhead lights vanished, and the 34th floor became a dark reflection of the storm outside. Then the emergency lights clicked on, casting a muted amber glow across the empty office. "Please tell me that was supposed to happen," I said. Ryan was already checking his phone. "I would be lying. You are allowed to lie once tonight. Make it comforting." That earned another small smile, but it disappeared when he read the building notification. Severe weather had disrupted power across several blocks downtown. Backup electricity was running essential systems, but the elevators had been temporarily suspended while building management completed a safety check. Ryan read the final sentence twice. "How long?" I asked. "No estimate." I walked to the windows. Rain swept sideways between the towers, and the streets 34 floors below gleamed beneath traffic lights and headlights. Even from up there, I could see cars barely moving. "So we are stuck." "Temporarily." That is a very project manager way to say stuck. Ryan joined me near the glass, leaving several feet between us. "Would you prefer trapped?" "Definitely not." He looked at the storm. "Then temporarily." I laughed, and something about hearing it in the nearly empty office made the situation feel less unsettling. My phone showed several transit delays and a warning advising people downtown to avoid unnecessary travel until the storm passed. Even if the elevators restarted immediately, getting home would not be simple. "My train is delayed," I said. "Mine, too." "You take the train?" Ryan turned toward me. "Why is that surprising?" "I assumed you had a black luxury car waiting downstairs." "With a driver?" "Obviously. And perhaps someone holding an umbrella over me." "Now you understand the image you project." Ryan shook his head, smiling. "I live 6 stops north. 1-bedroom apartment. No driver." "You are destroying years of carefully constructed assumptions." "Maybe your assumptions needed work." We returned to the conference room, where our laptops had switched to battery power. The internal network was still available, but the presentation files were temporarily inaccessible while the servers restarted. For the first time all night, there was nothing productive we could do. Ryan leaned back in his chair and looked toward my closed sketchbook. "You never answered me." "About what?" "Why you stopped drawing." I traced one finger around the rim of my coffee cup. "Life, I guess. College ended. Rent happened. Health insurance happened. I found a job that was close enough to art that I told myself it counted. But it does not." His certainty surprised me. "You barely know me." Ryan became quiet. "Maybe not as barely as you think." The words settled between us. I looked at him, waiting, but he lowered his eyes toward the table. For once, Ryan Carter seemed unsure of what to say. "What about you?" I asked. "What about me?" "You are 30 years old. You spend half your life fixing everyone else's problems, and apparently you eat grilled chicken at 1 in the morning because it has protein. Is this actually what you wanted?" Ryan stared through the darkened glass toward the city. The question seemed to reach somewhere deeper than I intended. When he finally answered, his voice was softer. "No." That single word changed the room. Until then, Ryan had always seemed like a man who had chosen every detail of his life. Now I could see exhaustion behind the composure, and something else I recognized because I carried it too. The quiet disappointment of waking up inside a life that looked successful from the outside, but did not feel entirely yours. Ryan turned toward me. "I think we have both been pretending for a long time." Before I could ask what he meant, his phone chimed. He read the new building alert, then looked at me with an expression caught somewhere between disbelief and amusement. "The elevators will remain suspended until morning." I glanced at the storm, then at the empty office around us. "So temporarily means all night." Ryan held my gaze. "Looks that way." And suddenly, with nowhere to go and no work left to hide behind, the man I thought I knew was sitting across from me like a stranger I wanted to understand. By 1:30 in the morning, the office had stopped feeling like an office. Ryan found 2 blankets in an emergency cabinet near reception, and I carried them back to the conference room while he collected bottled water from the break room. We abandoned the long table for the lounge near the windows, where 2 couches faced the Chicago skyline. The storm had softened slightly, but rain still painted silver trails across the glass. Ryan sat at one end of the larger couch, and I took the other, leaving a careful space between us. "So," I said, pulling the blanket over my knees, "you said no." Ryan glanced at me. "I have said many things tonight." When I asked if this was the life you wanted, his expression changed. For several seconds, he watched the rain instead of me. "I wanted to study architecture." That surprised me. "Seriously?" "Seriously. I was accepted into a graduate program in Boston." "What happened?" Ryan folded his hands together. "My father got sick during my senior year of college. My mother had already spent most of her savings helping my younger sister through school, so I took the first stable job I could find." There was no bitterness in his voice, which somehow made the confession heavier. "I told myself it would be temporary. Then I got promoted. The salary got better. My family needed less help, but by then everyone kept telling me how well I was doing. I understood that feeling too well." "So you stayed?" "I stayed." "Do you regret it?" Ryan considered the question. "Some days." He looked at me then. "Do you regret becoming a designer instead of an illustrator?" I smiled without humor. "Some days." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The strange thing was that the silence did not feel uncomfortable anymore. It felt honest. Ryan reached for the sketchbook I had placed on the coffee table, then stopped before touching it. "May I?" he asked. I hesitated before handing it to him. He opened it carefully, turning through pages filled with unfinished faces, storefronts, train passengers, and little pieces of Chicago I had drawn without thinking. He paused on a sketch of an older man reading beside a coffee shop window. "This is good, Evan. You do not have to say that." "I know." His answer came immediately. "That is why it matters." I looked away, suddenly embarrassed by how much those words affected me. My college professor used to say I drew people like I was trying to figure out what they were hiding. Ryan studied another page. "Maybe you were." "Maybe." He turned one more page and stopped. My stomach dropped. It was a quick pencil sketch from a meeting several months earlier. Ryan stood beside a conference room window, one hand in his pocket, looking down at the street. I had drawn it absent-mindedly, while another department presented quarterly numbers. Ryan stared at the picture longer than I wanted him to. "Is that me?" "Unfortunately, you drew me. I draw everyone. There are 30 people in our department. Do not make this weird." His smile returned, softer this time. "I am not making it weird. Your face says otherwise." "I am just surprised." I reached for the notebook, and our hands met over the cover. It was barely a touch, nothing more than our fingers arriving at the same place, but neither of us moved immediately. The office seemed impossibly quiet. Ryan looked down at our hands, then back at me. He withdrew first, slowly, giving me the sketchbook. "Sorry, you did not do anything." Something vulnerable passed through his expression before he leaned back against the couch. "You know what is funny?" he asked. "What?" I spent almost 2 years thinking you did not like me. I stared at him. I spent almost 2 years thinking you barely noticed me. Ryan gave a quiet laugh, but his eyes stayed on mine. Evan, I noticed you the first week you started. The first week, I repeated, because apparently my brain had decided those were the only words it could produce. Ryan nodded, still watching me with an expression that was far less guarded than anything I had seen from him during daylight hours. You came into the Monday planning meeting 7 minutes late. I stared at him. I thought you said you never noticed me. You thought that? I never said it. That was almost 2 years ago. 1 year and 10 months. I laughed in disbelief. That is somehow worse. Ryan looked down, smiling. You had coffee in one hand, your laptop under your arm, and a blue marker stain across your cheek. I remembered that morning. I had missed my train, spilled coffee on my jacket, and spent 10 minutes searching for a conference room that was directly across from the elevators. I was having a terrible day. You apologized to everyone, sat down, and somehow gave the best idea in the room 5 minutes later. My smile faded. There was something unnerving about hearing myself described through Ryan's memory. Not because it felt invasive, but because his version of me sounded like someone worth remembering. Is that why you know my coffee order? I asked. Ryan hesitated. That came later. And the no pickles? Later too. The thermostat? He sighed. Evan, I am collecting evidence. Against me? I have not decided yet. He laughed quietly, but I could see nervousness beneath it. That was when curiosity finally became courage. Why did you never ask me out? Ryan went completely still. The rain whispered against the windows behind us. I immediately wanted to take the question back, but it was too late. That was direct, he said. It is 2:40 in the morning. I think we passed normal coworker conversation about an hour ago. Ryan looked toward the city, gathering his thoughts. You never seemed interested. You never gave me anything to be interested in. You barely spoke to me unless there was a deadline involved. Because I was trying to be careful. Careful about what? His jaw tightened slightly. I am senior to you. I lead projects you work on. Even if I am not your direct manager, I never wanted you wondering whether saying no to me could affect your job. That answer silenced me. Of all the explanations I had imagined, I had not expected consideration. So you avoided me? I tried to keep things professional. Ryan, you memorized my sandwich. Apparently, I was not very good at keeping things professional in my head. I laughed, and Ryan covered his face for a second, embarrassed. Seeing the office's most composed man lose his composure over me felt strangely sweet. You still have not answered the question, I said. Ryan lowered his hand. Which question? I held his gaze. Did you like me? The humor disappeared from his face. For several seconds, the only sounds were rain and the quiet hum of emergency power. Then Ryan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, leaving the same respectful distance between us. Would it matter if I did? My heartbeat seemed suddenly louder than the storm. Maybe. Ryan studied my face as if he was afraid of misunderstanding one small expression. Then yes, he said softly. I did. I swallowed. Did. Something changed in his eyes. Evan, do you really want me to answer that? And for the first time all night, I was not sure which possibility frightened me more. Hearing him say no, or hearing him say yes. Yes, I said, and the word came out quieter than I intended. Ryan did not move. Yes, you want me to answer? He asked. Yes. He looked down for a moment, then back at me. I still like you, Evan. There it was. No dramatic confession, no perfect speech, just 6 simple words spoken in an almost dark office at nearly 3 in the morning. Somehow, that made them harder to dismiss. I tightened my hands around the blanket. You have a strange way of showing it. I know. You could have talked to me. I tried. I raised an eyebrow. When, last Christmas party, I walked over to ask if you wanted to get dinner sometime. I remembered that night, the crowded restaurant, the terrible holiday music, and Ryan standing near the bar while I talked with Daniel from marketing. You never asked. Daniel put his hand on your shoulder, and I assumed you were together. We went on 2 dates. Ryan blinked. 2. He spent the second one, talking about his cryptocurrency portfolio for 90 minutes. Ryan laughed. I could have competed with that. A weather report could have competed with that. The tension between us softened, but it did not disappear. It had changed into something warmer and more uncertain. I stood to refill my water, and Ryan followed a moment later. The emergency lighting left the hallway dim, and the city beyond the windows looked distant and quiet. As I turned near the conference table, my shoe caught the edge of a charging cable. I stumbled only slightly, but Ryan instinctively reached out and steadied me by the forearm. "You okay?" "Yes." His hand remained there for 1 second longer than necessary. My eyes dropped to it, then returned to his face. Ryan immediately loosened his hold, but I placed my hand lightly over his before he could pull away. His expression changed. "Evan, you have spent almost 2 years being careful. For a reason. I know." Neither of us moved. The space between us felt smaller than it had all night, yet Ryan still waited. That mattered to me. He did not assume. He did not close the distance. He simply looked at me and let the choice remain mine. "Tell me to move," he said softly. I could have. Instead, I shook my head. Ryan took one slow step closer. I could see the uncertainty behind his usual confidence, and suddenly I understood that he was just as nervous as I was. My heart raced as he leaned slightly toward me, stopping before the moment could become anything more. Then every overhead light flashed on at once. We both startled and stepped apart. A second later, our laptops chimed from the lounge. "Perfect timing," I muttered. Ryan laughed under his breath, rubbing the back of his neck. We returned to the computers and found the server connection restored. The presentation was waiting exactly where we had left it, demanding attention as if the last 5 minutes had never happened. Ryan sat beside me again, but something had shifted. Every glance lasted longer. Every accidental brush of our hands while passing a charger or notebook carried a new awareness. We worked for nearly 20 minutes before I noticed Ryan had become unusually quiet. "Are you regretting what you said?" I asked. He looked at me immediately. "No." "Then what is it?" Ryan glanced toward his screen, and the warmth in his expression faded behind that familiar professional calm. "I am thinking about morning. What happens in the morning?" He was silent long enough to make my chest tighten. "Everyone comes back," he said, "and this stops being simple." "Simple," I repeated. Ryan leaned back in his chair and rubbed his tired eyes. Maybe that was the wrong word. Definitely the wrong word. I mean, there are rules, reporting structures, office gossip. Tonight we are just two people talking. Tomorrow I become the senior project manager again. The way he said it made something inside me sink. "So that is it." "That is not what I said." "It sounds close." Ryan opened his mouth, then stopped when an email notification appeared on his laptop. He glanced at the screen, and I watched his expression tighten. "What?" I asked. "Nothing important." "You are terrible at saying nothing important while looking like that." He closed the notification, but another window remained visible behind it. I was not trying to read his screen. I only caught a few words because my name was one of them. Evan Miller. Internal transfer request. My stomach tightened. Why is my name in a transfer request? Ryan froze. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he slowly turned the laptop toward himself. "You were not supposed to see that. Clearly. It is old." "How old?" Ryan exhaled. 7 months. I stared at him. "Were you trying to transfer me?" "No. Myself." That answer stopped me. Ryan looked toward the windows before continuing. "I requested to move to another account group." "Why?" He gave me a tired, almost embarrassed smile. "I think you already know." I shook my head. "I want you to say it." Ryan was silent for a moment. "Because I realized I liked you." The room suddenly seemed very still. 7 months ago? Earlier than that. 7 months ago was when I finally admitted it was affecting how careful I was around you. "So you tried to leave?" "I tried to create distance." He folded his hands on the table. "You were building a good reputation here. You were getting bigger assignments. I did not want my feelings to complicate that, and I especially did not want you wondering whether my attention came with expectations." I looked at the closed sketchbook beside my laptop. All those months I had interpreted Ryan's distance as indifference, maybe even dislike. Now the same memories rearranged themselves into something completely different. "What happened to the transfer?" I asked. "My director asked me to stay through the spring campaign. Then another project came up. I kept postponing it." "Because of work?" Ryan met my eyes. "Not entirely." I felt my face grow warm. "You know, for someone who manages communication for a living, you are remarkably bad at this." He laughed softly. "I am beginning to understand that. You could have told me, and risk making you uncomfortable every day afterward. You decided how I would feel without asking me." His smile disappeared. "You are right. There was no defense, no excuse. Just that." I am sorry. The sincerity in his voice took away most of my frustration. I moved from my chair to the one beside him, leaving only a few inches between our shoulders. For the record, I said, you did make me uncomfortable. Ryan looked concerned. I did. Yes. I spent almost 2 years wondering why the annoyingly handsome project manager treated me like an email with legs. Ryan stared at me, then laughed so suddenly that I started laughing too. Annoyingly handsome? That is the part you heard. It was difficult to ignore. Our laughter faded, but I stayed beside him. Ryan looked at me with that same cautious warmth I had begun recognizing. I never wanted to make your life harder, Evan. Maybe stop deciding what is best for me without asking. He nodded. Fair. And maybe stop running away. His eyes searched mine. Are you asking me to stay? I looked toward the windows. Beyond them, the rain was finally beginning to weaken, and somewhere behind the clouds, morning was getting closer. I think I am asking you to give me the chance to decide what this could be. Then I am staying, Ryan said. There was no hesitation this time, and somehow that mattered. More than any dramatic promise could have. I looked at him, expecting the familiar professional mask to return, but it did not. He simply sat beside me in the quiet office, tired and uncertain and more open than I had ever seen him. What happens now? He asked. I smiled. You are asking me? You told me to stop deciding for you. Good. You learn quickly. Ryan laughed softly. Outside, the storm had faded to a steady drizzle. The black sky above Chicago was slowly turning gray, and the buildings across the street were beginning to take shape again. It was almost 5:30 in the morning. We had been awake all night, yet I felt strangely alert. The presentation, Ryan said. Right. The reason we are actually here. We returned to the conference table and spent the next hour finishing the final slides. But working beside Ryan felt different now. There was no invisible wall between us. When I changed a layout, he asked why instead of simply approving it. When he rewrote a section, I teased him for using too many corporate phrases. At one point, he typed strategic alignment, and I reached over to delete it. Absolutely not. The client likes that phrase. Nobody likes that phrase. You are very opinionated before sunrise. You are just discovering this. No, Ryan said, looking at me. I think I have always liked that about you. My hand stopped over the keyboard. He smiled and returned to his screen as if he had not just made my heart forget its rhythm. At 6:20, we finally submitted the presentation. A confirmation appeared on Ryan's laptop. Done. After hours of fixing numbers, rebuilding graphics, and accidentally dismantling nearly 2 years of misunderstandings, there was nothing left to do. I walked toward the windows. The rain had stopped. Pale gold sunlight slipped between the clouds and reflected from hundreds of windows across downtown. Ryan joined me, carrying 2 cups of terrible breakroom coffee. He handed one to me. No oat milk, he said. I will survive. No vanilla either. Now you are testing the limits of this relationship. Ryan smiled at the word relationship, and I immediately became aware that I had used it. I did not mean relationship like relationship. I know. Good. Although I would not object. I turned toward him. For once, Ryan did not look away. Ryan. Yes. You asked me earlier if I really wanted your answer. I remember. I think I have mine now. His expression softened. Neither of us needed to ask what I meant. I stepped closer, leaving enough space for either of us to change our minds. Ryan set his coffee down on the windowsill. Are you sure? He asked. That question, more than anything else, made me certain. Yes. He leaned toward me slowly, giving me every opportunity to step back. I did not. Our first kiss was brief and gentle, almost cautious, and when we separated, Ryan looked at me with such surprised happiness that I laughed. What? He asked. Nothing. I have just never seen you look this nervous. I have never kissed a coworker at sunrise after being trapped in an office all night. That is strangely specific. It has been a strangely specific night. My phone chimed before I could answer. Building management announced that the elevators were operating again. Ryan checked the time. The morning staff will start arriving soon. Reality returned with those words, but it no longer frightened me the way it had an hour earlier. Then we should probably leave. Ryan nodded, but neither of us moved immediately. Finally, he picked up his jacket and my sketchbook from the table. Before handing it back, he glanced at the cover. Promise me something. What? Draw something today. I took the notebook from him. Only if you promise me something too. Anything reasonable. I smiled. Stop pretending you do not notice me. Ryan held my gaze as the first clear sunlight filled the office. Evan, he said quietly, I do not think I could stop noticing you if I tried. The elevator doors opened just after 7, revealing a lobby that looked completely ordinary, which felt almost insulting after the night Ryan and I had just lived through. Outside, Chicago was waking beneath a washed-clean sky. Delivery trucks moved along the wet streets. Coffee shops switched on their signs, and commuters hurried beneath umbrellas even though the rain had finally stopped. Ryan stood beside me with his jacket over one arm, looking as exhausted as I felt. Breakfast? He asked. I glanced at him. Is that a coworker breakfast? No. His answer was immediate. Good. We found a small diner 3 blocks from the office, the kind with red booths, bottomless coffee, and a waitress who called everyone honey. Sitting across from Ryan in morning sunlight felt stranger than kissing him upstairs. There were no emergency lights, no storm, no excuse for intimacy. Just 2 men choosing to stay at the same table when we were finally free to leave. Ryan ordered eggs and toast. I ordered pancakes, and he looked amused when I poured far too much maple syrup over them. Do not judge me, I said. I am gathering evidence. I laughed because I recognized my own words from hours earlier. That became our beginning. Not a dramatic promise, just breakfast. A week later, Ryan took me to dinner at a little Italian restaurant near Lincoln Park. 3 weeks after that, he spoke with his director and arranged to move off projects where he had senior authority over my work. He told me only after the change was approved. I wanted this to be simple, he explained. For both of us. Nothing about you is simple, Carter. You still came to dinner. Your competition was Daniel and his cryptocurrency portfolio. Ryan laughed so loudly that the couple at the next table looked over. By fall, people at work knew we were together, and the world did not collapse. Ryan was still annoyingly punctual. I was still occasionally 7 minutes late. He still remembered my coffee order, except now he sometimes left it beside my keyboard with a tiny drawing on the cup. His artistic ability was terrible. I kept every one. The biggest change was quieter. On my 27th birthday, Ryan handed me a wrapped package over dinner. Inside was a leather-bound sketchbook. The first page was blank except for 6 words in his careful handwriting. Make room for what you love. I stared at that sentence for a long time. The next morning, I started drawing again. At first, only 10 minutes before work. Then 30. Eventually, I began illustrating on weekends, taking small freelance projects that reminded me of the person I had almost forgotten how to be. Ryan never claimed credit. He simply noticed every new drawing. 6 months after the storm, we were once again the last 2 people on the 34th floor. This time there was no emergency. I was finishing an illustration at my desk while Ryan answered one final email. The city glittered beyond the windows, clear and bright. Ryan walked over and placed his car keys beside my sketchbook. Ready to go home? He asked. I looked at the drawing in front of me. It showed 2 men sitting beside a window while rain blurred the city beyond them. Between them were 2 coffee cups and an open notebook. Ryan studied it and smiled. Is that us? Unfortunately, you draw me a lot for someone who finds me annoying. I closed the sketchbook and stood. Maybe I notice you too. Ryan reached for my hand, and together we walked toward the elevators. Months earlier, I had thought home meant my apartment, my couch, and whatever leftovers were waiting in my refrigerator. Somewhere along the way, the word had changed. The elevator arrived, and Ryan held the door while I stepped inside. He followed, still holding my hand. As the doors closed on the empty office, I realized something simple. That storm had not created our feelings. It had only given us enough silence to finally hear them. For the first few weeks after Ryan and I started going home together, I kept waiting for ordinary life to expose some flaw in what we had found. A stormy night could make almost anything feel meaningful, but Tuesday mornings were less forgiving. Tuesday mornings had crowded trains, unanswered emails, cold coffee, and meetings that should have been 15 minutes, but somehow lasted an hour. Yet that was where I discovered the version of Ryan I loved most. He was not the perfectly composed man from the conference room or the mysterious coworker I had spent nearly 2 years misunderstanding. He was the man who texted me when my train was delayed to make sure I had an umbrella. He was the man who remembered my mother called every Sunday afternoon, so he never made plans for us until after 4. He was the man who stood in my kitchen one Saturday morning staring suspiciously at a pancake because I had tried to make it look like the Chicago skyline. That is supposed to be Willis Tower, I told him. It looks like a crooked lighthouse. You studied architecture. Show some imagination. I am showing restraint. I threw a dish towel at him, and he laughed. Those small moments became the real story of us. Ryan started sketching again too, although he insisted architectural drawings did not count as art. One evening, he showed me a notebook filled with ideas for small homes and community spaces. I recognized the careful lines immediately. They belonged to the part of him he had packed away years earlier, just as I had packed away my illustrations. You should do something with these, I said. Ryan gave me the same skeptical look I must have given him months before. I have a career. So did I. You were suggesting I start over at 30? No. I am suggesting you stop treating the things you love like they expired. He went quiet. Then he smiled. That sounds familiar. By winter, Ryan enrolled in an evening architecture course at a college a few miles from our office. He kept his job, but twice a week he left at 6 instead of staying until everyone else had gone home. I loved watching him learn how to leave. I was learning too. My freelance illustration work grew until a local magazine asked me to create artwork for a Chicago neighborhood feature. The day the issue arrived, Ryan bought 4 copies. Why 4? I asked. 1 for us, 1 for my mother, 1 for my sister, and 1 in case you become famous. That is ridiculous. I am planning ahead. Nearly a year after the night that brought us together, another summer storm rolled across the city. Rain tapped against the windows of Ryan's apartment while we sat on the floor surrounded by takeout containers, sketchbooks, and architecture textbooks. My phone buzzed with a weather alert, and I laughed. What? Ryan asked. Nothing. I was just thinking about the last time Chicago trapped us indoors. Ryan looked toward the rain, then back at me. Best inconvenience of my life. I rested my head against his shoulder. You know, we probably would have figured it out eventually. Maybe. You do not sound convinced. I spent almost 2 years memorizing your coffee order instead of asking you to dinner. I was not exactly moving quickly. I laughed, and he took my hand. Outside, thunder rolled softly over the city, but neither of us needed the storm anymore. We had learned how to talk in daylight, how to make room for old dreams, and how to choose each other during completely ordinary days. That was the part one had never expected. Falling for Ryan had started with one extraordinary night, but loving him became something much quieter. It became breakfast, train rides, unfinished drawings, shared keys, and someone beside me who noticed when I was becoming more myself. By the time our second winter together arrived, Ryan had become very good at leaving the office on time and absolutely terrible at hiding surprises. I realized something was happening when he asked me to keep Friday evening free, then refused to explain why. Dinner, I guessed. Maybe. Architecture exhibit? Maybe. Your mother is visiting and you forgot to tell me? Ryan looked genuinely alarmed. She would never forgive me. Friday came cold and clear, with a few inches of old snow gathered along the sidewalks. After work, Ryan met me in the lobby wearing the navy coat I liked and carrying 2 coffees. Mine had oat milk, 2 pumps of vanilla, and no whipped cream. Some things never changed. Where are we going? I asked. You asked too many questions. You once memorized my lunch order from a distance. You do not get to criticize curiosity. We walked several blocks until I recognized the neighborhood, then the street, then the building ahead of us. Ryan. He kept walking. Ryan Carter. That sounds serious. That is our office. He smiled. Good observation. We entered through the lobby, rode to the 34th floor, and stepped into a nearly empty workspace. It was Friday evening, but not late enough to feel mysterious. A few lights remained on, and the city beyond the windows glittered beneath a clear sky. Ryan led me toward the lounge where we had spent that first long night talking. On the coffee table sat a familiar leather-bound sketchbook. Mine. You took my sketchbook? Borrowed. Without asking. I am taking a calculated risk. I opened it. Most pages were exactly as I remembered, but near the back was something new. Ryan had placed a photograph between 2 blank pages. It showed the community center he had designed for his architecture course, the first project he had ever presented publicly. Beside it was a printed copy of my magazine illustration. 2 dreams we had almost abandoned, side by side. Underneath, Ryan had written a date. The date of the storm. You remembered, I said. Of course I remembered. I looked up and found him watching me with that same expression he had worn before our first kiss, nervous beneath all that practiced calm. I used to think that night changed my life, he said. But I was wrong. That is unexpectedly disappointing. He smiled. The night only opened a door. Everything afterward changed my life. Breakfast with you. Watching you draw again. Going to class because you reminded me that 30 was not too late to want something different. Coming home and knowing you would probably steal half my fries even after saying you were not hungry. That happened twice. It happened yesterday. I laughed, but my eyes were beginning to sting. Ryan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small key on a simple silver ring. I stared at it. What is that? My apartment key. I already have your apartment key. Not that apartment. He handed it to me. I found a place in Lincoln Square. 2 bedrooms. Big windows. A small room with enough light for your drawing table. There is also space near the living room windows for an architecture desk. I looked from the key to him. Are you asking me to move in with you? Ryan nodded. Only if you want to. No pressure. No deadline. No project plan. You made a project plan, did you not? There may be a spreadsheet. I laughed through the emotion tightening my throat. Then I closed my fingers around the key. Yes. Ryan blinked. Yes. Yes, Carter. I want to come home with you. His smile was immediate and completely unguarded. He pulled me into a warm embrace, and I rested my cheek against his shoulder while Chicago glowed beyond the windows. Nearly 2 years earlier, we had sat in this same place believing we were trapped until morning. Now, standing there with a key in my hand and our forgotten dreams filling the pages between us, I understood how wrong we had been. We had not been trapped at all. For the first time, we had finally been given enough time to find the way forward. Moving in together did not happen in one cinematic afternoon. It happened through cardboard boxes, misplaced phone chargers, arguments about closet space, and one Saturday, when Ryan somehow labeled a box miscellaneous kitchen items, even though it contained nothing except coffee mugs. This is why designers should handle labels, I told him, standing in the middle of our new apartment in Lincoln Square. Ryan looked around at the mountain of boxes surrounding us. You labeled one box important creative objects. Those were important. It contained 6 notebooks and a ceramic penguin. Exactly. He laughed, and I realized how different that sound had become to me. Once, hearing Ryan laugh had felt like discovering a secret. Now it belonged to ordinary mornings, grocery store aisles, train platforms, and evenings when we were both too tired to cook. Our second bedroom slowly became the room Ryan had promised. My drawing table stood beneath one window, his architecture desk beneath the other. Between them was a bookshelf we assembled incorrectly the first time and refused to discuss afterward. Some nights we worked quietly on opposite sides of the room. I illustrated magazine assignments while Ryan developed his portfolio. We did not need constant conversation. Sometimes companionship was simply looking up and finding the person you loved still there. Then, one Tuesday evening in early spring, Ryan came home carrying an envelope. He placed it beside my sketchbook without saying anything. What is this? I asked. Open it. Inside was an acceptance letter from a Chicago architecture program designed for working professionals. I read the first sentence twice before looking at him. You got in. Ryan nodded, but his expression was strangely uncertain. You got in, I repeated, louder this time. I wrapped my arms around him before he could say another word. He laughed against my shoulder. I am going to assume that means you approve. Ryan, this is incredible. It also means classes 3 nights a week. Probably weekends sometimes. I might have to reduce my hours at the agency. I stepped back. Are you trying to talk yourself out of being happy? He considered that. Possibly. You are terrible at it. His smile softened. I learned from you. That summer, our lives became busier, but somehow fuller. Ryan studied building design at the dining table when his desk disappeared beneath textbooks. I took on a series of illustrations for a children's publisher, something I would never have imagined accepting 2 years earlier. We celebrated small victories with takeout pizza and cheap sparkling cider because Ryan insisted ordinary Tuesdays deserved celebrations too. There were difficult days. We got tired. We occasionally misunderstood each other. Once, I accused him of ignoring me when he was actually trying to finish a major assignment before midnight. Another time, he tried to solve a problem I only wanted to complain about. But we learned a sentence that saved us repeatedly. What do you need from me right now? Sometimes the answer was advice. Sometimes it was space. Sometimes it was simply, sit with me. One evening, almost 3 years after that first storm, I came home to find Ryan standing beside our living room window watching rain begin to fall over Chicago. 2 coffee cups waited on the table. Mine was exactly right. Bad weather, I said. Apparently. I joined him at the window. Ryan handed me my cup, then looked toward the clouds with exaggerated concern. We should probably stay inside. Could be dangerous. Very responsible. I have experience with storms. I smiled and rested my shoulder against his. For a while, we watched the rain without speaking. The city below us continued moving, headlights reflecting across wet pavement, trains carrying strangers toward thousands of different lives. I thought about the people we had been when we first sat together through a storm, both convinced adulthood meant accepting whatever life had handed us. Ryan had taught me something different, although I do not think he ever realized it. Love was not someone arriving to complete your life. It was someone standing beside you while you found the courage to make your life your own. Ryan lifted his coffee. What are you thinking about? I looked at him and smiled. How lucky we were that the elevators stopped working. Maybe lucky is not the word I would use, Ryan said, looking at the rain beyond our living room window. You complained about those elevators for at least 3 hours. I was tired. You were dramatic. I was trapped 34 floors above Chicago with a man who communicated mostly through spreadsheets. Ryan smiled into his coffee. And yet you stayed. The elevators were not working. Details. I laughed and leaned against him, watching the lights below shimmer across the wet streets. 3 years had passed, but storms still carried me back to that office, to emergency lights and terrible coffee, and the first moment I realized Ryan Carter was not the man I had invented in my head. He had changed since then. So had I. Ryan was halfway through his architecture program now, balancing classes with reduced hours at the agency. I had recently signed a contract to illustrate my first full children's book. Our second bedroom was crowded with pencils, tracing paper, rulers, paint samples, and enough coffee cups to concern any reasonable person. Our life was not perfect. It was simply ours. Come here, Ryan said. I am already here. Closer. He guided me toward his architecture desk, where a large sheet of paper rested beneath a protective cover. I wanted to show you something. He lifted the cover. The drawing underneath was a detailed design for a small neighborhood arts center. Wide windows filled one wall. There were classrooms, studio spaces, a reading room, and a courtyard surrounded by trees. Ryan, this is beautiful. He pointed toward a room near the front. Illustration studio. Very subtle. I needed expert consultation. I studied the drawing more carefully and noticed 2 tiny figures near the entrance. One was carrying a portfolio. The other held 2 coffee cups. Are those supposed to be us? Unfortunately. I looked at him and laughed. You have been waiting years to use that against me. Absolutely. He reached for my hand. There was something wonderfully ordinary about the moment. No grand announcement. No audience. Just rain against the windows and dinner waiting in the kitchen. I thought about how differently I once imagined love. I had expected certainty to arrive like lightning, something unmistakable that divided life into before and after. Instead, love had arrived through attention. A remembered coffee order. A sandwich without pickles. A blanket from an emergency cabinet. A question asked at the right moment. A person who noticed when I was cold, when I was afraid, and when I had stopped making room for the things that made me happy. I used to think you barely saw me, I said. Ryan squeezed my hand. I know, and you thought I did not like you. You were difficult to read. I drew you in my notebook. I did not know that until the night we got stuck together. I smiled. We wasted a lot of time. Ryan shook his head. Maybe we needed that time. I looked at him. Why? Because when we finally talked, we were ready to listen. The answer stayed with me. Outside, the rain began to soften. Somewhere in the apartment, the timer on our oven chimed, reminding us that dinner was ready and tomorrow would bring work, deadlines, classes, grocery lists, train delays, and all the ordinary responsibilities waiting for us. Ryan started toward the kitchen, then turned back. Coming home, he asked. Home. 3 years later, that word still made me smile. I closed his architecture notebook, took my coffee, and followed him. Right behind you. And that was how our greatest change lasted. Not as one extraordinary night frozen in memory, but as thousands of ordinary moments afterward, each one quietly proving that sometimes the person who changes your life has been sitting a few desks away, waiting for both of you to finally look up.